you, Scooby-Doo, and Shaggy too before I'm through. That's what I'll do. I scare goblins, ghosts, and ghouls, hooky owls, or bats. Grown-up folk and little kids, I even scare my cat.
Hello, Scoopsters.
Hello, fools and ghouls.
And we are back with another episode of A Pod Named Scooby-Doo. And today we have none other than the Bradley Clarke. Bradley, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you were interested in coming on a Scooby-Doo themed podcast? You got the shirt, you got everything. What made you say, hey, I want to talk about some Scooby-Doo?
Well, I come dressed to impress. I always like to do that. First of all, I want to know, am I a fool or am I a ghoul?
This is a great question.
I would say ghoul. I don't think you're a fool.
Okay, good. I just wanted to get that out of the way before, in case people wanted to call me a fool, and I know that I'm not a fool. But well, I hope to prove myself that I'm not a Scooby-Doo fool through this episode. But hello, I'm Bradley. It's funny. A lot of people know me as the game show guy, and I know all these facts and figures and tidbits and Brad facts about game shows and the game show world. But if there's one thing that I'm passionate about besides game shows, it's Scooby-Doo. I own every single movie on DVD. I've been watching this show since practically a wee little lad. I've seen all the major episodes countless number of times. Scooby-Doo is like, besides game shows, Scooby-Doo is like my passion. So when I saw that you were doing this, and by the way, I love the title, A Pod Named Scooby-Doo. I'm really shocked someone didn't think of this beforehand. I'm glad you snatched it up, and I know you too. So I was able to come on.
We're going to have to check with the lawyers on this. No, I think there's a lot of Scooby-Doo themed podcasts if you go digging, but we thought it'd be fun to talk with friends. And today we're talking about none other than one of your favorites, a request Scooby-Doo meets the Boo Brothers, which
not just one of my favorites, my favorite Scooby-Doo movie of all time.
Incredible. And I mean, 1987, and it's part of this little, I'll call it a package of three movies. We talked about Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf with David O'Brien, which we thought did not hold up. This, very different, but still, there's no Daphne, there's no Velma, there's no Fred. There's Scooby, there's Scrappy, and there's Shaggy, and it's about them just basically having their own little misadventures on the side. So as we've been doing, just from Kalle, we've been doing these little one-sentence summaries for anyone who hasn't seen it. If you're giving a very quick plot summary, someone has no idea who the Boo Brothers are, what this movie is. It's 1987. It's a different era we're talking. Kalle, what's the one-sentence summary?
One-sentence summary. Here we go. Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy go to Shaggy's dead uncle's house to find treasure that is hidden with the help of three ghosts named the Boo Brothers.
Yeah, and the movie jumps right into it, which I loved. And after, it's been a while since I know both Kalle and I have watched it. Bradley, watching it back, maybe what's something that you noticed about it, maybe as an adult from watching as a kid, or something different watching it in 2020, because the animation is a little dated in a sense?
Sure. So despite it being my favorite, I haven't watched it in a while. And I actually watched it twice in the last couple of days. The first time I just watched it so I can remember the story and, all the generic aspects of the storyline. And then the second one, I really studied it. I looked for different things and, what I thought might have worked, what didn't work. And unlike what you said about the Reluctant Werewolf, I actually thought it held up pretty good. I thought the story was actually very good. Being the game guy that I am, I love the scavenger hunt aspect of it. And it was funny because, I was younger when I watched it and didn't really think too much about the riddles. I just loved the fact that they were finding clues and whatnot. But I actually thought that the riddle writing was actually very good. I actually found myself really enjoying thinking about the clues with the chimney, like your knee sticks out, like, oh, wow, that's actually a really good riddle. And the different clues that they hid throughout. So in terms of that side of the story, I thought it held up. The animation, of course, it's 1987. And you're not going to get the technology you have today, but comparing it to the older style animation that we see in the Scooby-Doo Where Are You series and whatnot, I actually thought that the details itself weren't too bad. You kind of get that nostalgic feel of the animation without really nitpicking it for what it might be if it was, say, 10 years down the road. So I actually really enjoyed watching that animation. And I know that, I believe, because they were packaged as 3 of these 10 movies from, it was called the Hanna-Barbera, what was it? Hanna-Barbera Superstars 10, I believe it was called. And it was this, Ghoul School, and Reluctant Werewolf. And I believe I read somewhere that, because Reluctant Werewolf was one of the last 2, and that they used a different form of animation. This one they actually used, like they drew everything. So, which I find really cool, because, you know, you don't get that nowadays. Everything's computer generated and whatnot. So to watch a movie that was hand drawn, and, you know, you can see the same slides happening over and over again. I think that's always one of the biggest appeals of an older style cartoon, especially Scooby-Doo. So I actually really enjoyed watching it from the animation standpoint and from the storyline standpoint.
I have to say, I did enjoy watching this one more than because I hated the Reluctant Werewolf on the rewatch. So I definitely enjoyed this one more than that one.
Yeah, and the animation and being a part of this Superstars 10 pack, as you said, which we'll get into. First, a line I love with, you were saying, the chimney rail. A line I love, Shaggy's looking, he goes, "Where would you find a knee in a house?" And Sadie pops up out of a bush and goes, "What about lips on a girl?" And I just lost it. I don't know why. I was like, that, whoever wrote that must have gotten out of the writing room that day and been like, I nailed it today. That was a good day. But what I think the movie does really well, also from a plot perspective, is it jumps right into it immediately. There's a ghost. Like, first 5 seconds, we see what's happening. And what happened, I think, in the Reluctant Werewolf is, and I think happens in all 3 of these, is they tend to be around an hour and a half. And the first 30 minutes tends to be one thing. And then the next hour is a whole separate kind of bit. So like you were saying, Bradley, with the scavenger hunt aspect, it doesn't happen until about 30, 40 minutes into the movie. So the first 30 minutes really need to keep you engaged. And then the whole hour needs to keep it going. And I think the constant action of having Billy Bob running after them, there's a random ape that's in love with Scooby-Doo. That's, I don't know why. They don't really explain why he loves Scooby-Doo. It's just, you know, cute. And there's a lot going on that I think makes it just much more enjoyable, because there's just more thrown at you that's maybe just, I think, the right amount that's not too overwhelming. But when it comes to the Superstars 10 pack, it's very different from other Scooby-Doo. And it's hard to pinpoint, other than obviously Shaggy's in a red shirt. It's very much geared for the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy show audience. Bradley, do you maybe can enjoy this series separately from Scooby-Doo? Or when you clump it together, where do you think it kind of ranks in your head among other Scooby-Doo media?
So it's a very interesting period, because we haven't seen an actual mystery on Scooby-Doo since the Scooby-Doo show, which was, quote unquote, the 3rd season of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Because you had the 2 series of the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show, which were real villains. And then you had the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, which were real villains. And then even afterwards, with Ghoul School and Reluctant Werewolf, you had real villains. So even though this had real ghosts, I love the fact that there was still a mystery, because I think the core fundamental of Scooby-Doo is you want to be able to solve the mystery. It's, you know, I guess being the game guy that I am, I love the idea of being able to figure it out either with Scooby-Doo or before Scooby-Doo, or even better than Scooby-Doo and the gang itself. So I actually think that this one in particular is really almost like a benchmark in terms of this era of Scooby-Doo, especially the 80s, until we get to A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, which I believe started in 88, which was a year later. So I would say that this one in particular, one of the reasons why I think this is the best one in these 3 is because there is still a mystery. And that's what I watched Scooby-Doo for, a mystery. Sure, you have, you know, the chases and the comedy and whatnot, but, you know, when you think of Scooby-Doo, what do you think of? Who's under the mask? And that's what the joy about this one compared to the other 2, Ghoul School and Reluctant Werewolf, and even the entire last 10 years of Scooby-Doo which was no real mystery. It was just, you know, let's see who's in this, which scary creatures in this town.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get to the ending, which I think this movie actually has a lot of potential culprits of who could be an actual ghost, who's not. And obviously at the way end, you know, there's this idea that, oh, there could be an actual ghost other than the Boo brothers, which we'll get into because they're the titular characters here. But I think with this series of movies too, I think it's just them trying to spice it up, add Scrappy-Doo. And right now I want to talk about Scrappy-Doo, who I know Kalle and I are kind of known haters of Scrappy-Doo. But before we talk, Bradley, are you a known Scrappy-Doo hater from this movie? Maybe what do you find compelling or uncompelling about his character?
So it's interesting. So when I was a kid, I absolutely loved Scrappy-Doo. I would go around saying puppy power all the time. I absolutely loved Scrappy-Doo. I was really mad when I realized that he wasn't in more of the series, when I realized that he was only in a certain number of series. Because Boomerang used to air the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show, and I was like, oh my God, Scrappy-Doo, where is he in other things? And then it's funny, so then I rewatched, because they released on DVD the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show, and I haven't watched it in years. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, these are a little boring, to be honest. And I don't think it's Scrappy-Doo's fault. I think that what they tried to do was add more comedy to it. And by that, they needed some sort of character to develop that comedy off of. Because Scrappy-Doo is like the opposite of Scooby-Doo. He's smart. He's not afraid of anything. He's a go-getter. And, opposites are what draw comedy most of the time. And so I enjoyed Scrappy-Doo as a kid. When I rewatched the episodes, I was like, eh. But in terms of this movie, I actually really enjoyed Scrappy-Doo for the fact that he was almost the guider of the game, per se. He was the one solving all the clues, except for the piano one, which Shaggy figured out. Scrappy was the one leading the charge in terms of this. And I actually think we really have a lot of funny moments with Scrappy-Doo in this. When he's calling like the horse race, when it's like the ape chasing Scrappy, chasing Sadie versus whatnot. I think that was a funny moment for Scrappy-Doo. So would I say I'm an absolute Scrappy-Doo hater? No, but I do see your point in why there might be some adversity to Scrappy-Doo.
Yeah, Kalle, in this movie, Scrappy-Doo, I think for the most part, kind of like Bradley was saying, he's moving the plot along. He's the one, something silly happens, something random happens. Oh, the random thing happened. Here's the clue. On to the next bit, which is basically the last hour up until the last 10 minutes of the movie. In this, do you like Scrappy-Doo more, or are you still, Kalle, thinking, wow, I really hate this guy?
I do still hate him. However, he was more likable in this one than he is in other things. But I noticed something in this one that I think he does in all of them, but that I hadn't thought about before that makes him annoying to me. And that's that he's walking around on two legs, like he's not a dog. Scooby-Doo's walking around like a dog. Why is Scrappy walking around like a person? It's annoying.
I guess maybe it's a short complex. He's short. He wants to be taller. He's a go-getter, like you were saying, Bradley. Bradley, do you have thoughts on this? Why do you think this could be why everyone finds him annoying? We've cracked it.
You know what's funny? I never thought of that, and you brought something up that I'm like, wow, that light bulb moment. Like, right, he does only walk on two legs. Maybe he thinks, maybe your dog question about whether Scooby-Doo thinks he's a dog or not is really applying to Scrappy-Doo. But I guess we'll get to that in a little bit. But you know what? I really don't think. I think maybe it's on the lines of what you said. To be honest, if he's on four legs, that's pretty short for Scrappy-Doo. Plus, I think Scrappy acts more like a human than Scooby-Doo does, especially in terms of his thinking. He's for a cartoon dog, he's pretty intellectual from what we see in this movie. Not to say that Scooby-Doo isn't intellectual, because that's kind of his character. But I actually think that Scrappy-Doo is better off on two legs. Plus, he needs his other two, paws to do puppy power.
They definitely set him up in a way where he doesn't. I feel like Scooby-Doo, because of the way he talks, because of the way he is, you're kind of like, okay, that's not a human, which we'll get into. But Scrappy-Doo, they don't set him up where you're like, that's a dog. They kind of set him up in a different, more personified way. And in this movie, there's really no indicators as to whether Scooby-Doo believes he's a dog. But compared to the Reluctant Werewolf, he talks more. He has, I want to say, like a thicker accent, it feels like, even though it's the same voice actor being Don Messick. And it's just weird that this ape is obsessed with him, and I can't pinpoint where it starts or the reasoning, or if I have an issue with it. Not sure why. But Kalle, do you think there's any way that we could pinpoint if Scooby-Doo is aware of it? Is he cognizant in this movie of what we're talking about, that he might actually be a dog? Is it because Scrappy-Doo is there that they kind of don't poke fun at, and they're like, he's an uncle now. He has to take care of someone?
Yeah, I think so. I think because there's another dog like Scrappy throughout the entire movie, there's no jokes or anything about Scooby not being aware that he's a dog. And I think that probably is because Scrappy's there. Because it wouldn't make sense if he's Scrappy's uncle and he was like, who? Me? A dog? I mean, my nephew's a dog, sure, but me? Who? That wouldn't make sense. So, and I don't remember there being anything in this one, like any jokes or anything like that. I don't think there were any about him not knowing. So I'm going to say, sure. And this one, he knows he's a dog.
Bradley, without any clear pinpoint signs or jokes like they make in some of the later releases, do you think that Scooby-Doo is even aware of what's going on around him in this movie, or is he just following Shaggy for the ride?
Ooh, interesting. I think in all Scooby-Doos, there's that role play of, okay, he's part of the gang, he's their dog, he's following along, and he gets top billing. But I think that in this one, I think he's a little more into the actual mystery of it, because at the end of the day, in this one, they know what they're going after. It's not like they know that there's someone they have to stop from doing some sort of either criminal act or whatnot. The whole aspect of this is, sure, there's some ghosts, but their goal is to find this treasure at the end, and they know that going into the start in terms of what they're after. So I think that Scooby has some sort of, okay, here's what we have to do. I get it. I get what we're doing. And not just, okay, why are you making me go into this creepy looking doorway?
Yeah, that makes sense. And when they get from point A to point B, this is a segue alert. At the ending here, there's Headless Horseman. There's many different of these ghosts and ghouls and monsters. And the ending really astounded me. For those who don't know, spoiler alert, we find out that the sheriff, who we thought was this nice guy sheriff, who about 3/4 of the way through the movie, we're like, is he really on our side here? It turns out he is actually the twin brother of the real sheriff, who has a mustache, who I think looks much more cooler, in my opinion, and that he is the one who has been dressing up as a skeleton and trying to find this treasure for himself. How, if he got the treasure, what his next plan was going to be, I don't know. Kalle, did the ending being different maybe because we had watched Reluctant Werewolf? This comes before that. There's real monsters, but at the end they unmask someone. Were you a bit surprised? I felt like there were more people this time that it could have been the culprit, especially Farquaad, who was like just the creepiest character I've seen in any of these. But I think what I'm getting at is, did the ending surprise you in any way? Did it feel like a cop-out because it's just like, he has a twin brother who's evil and this one's the good one?
I don't think it felt like a cop-out. I think it was interesting, especially because, I don't know, the other ones from this era, it's just real monsters. There's no like unmasking thing. So I think the fact that there was like an unmasking and like a whodunit part made it more interesting than, say, the Reluctant Werewolf. And I don't think it's a cop-out that he's like the twin brother or whatever, because that's not something that happens like every episode in Scooby-Doo. It's not like there's always an evil twin. So I think it was fine. I thought it was interesting.
If I might add, it's interesting that you say that you thought that there was possible culprits, a number. When I watched it back, so I remembered who was the culprit. All these years later, I remembered it was Sheriff Busby. But when I watched it as I studied it, it was so interesting to watch. It was so easy to pick up that it was him. From the very beginning, with the Beauregard's ghost saying, leave this place, he had a southern drawl. And it sounded just like Sheriff Busby. And it was interesting because Beauregard's ghost and the Skull Ghost were voiced by two different people. the Skull, they were voiced by the guy who also voiced Farquaad, or at least the Skull Ghost was, I know at least. And so you can tell there's a difference in the voices. And, you know, at the end of the movie, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but just to continue the thought, at the end of the movie, when, you know, the Skull Ghost captures him in the boat and he's going to the slot machine fireplace, you can tell he sounds like Farquaad. And then right before they unmask him, he goes back to the Southern drawl voice. So it was really lopsided voiceover work, I think, in terms of the ghosts and Sheriff Busby. But I picked up that it was Sheriff Busby right away, from the leave this place to the sheriff wasn't available at one time. I found him to be a very clear-cut person of interest.
Yeah, I think what happens in a lot of these too is there's only one or two people that could be. And I was just happy that even if we know who, even if you catch on early, there's still other interesting people with motives. You still have Farquaad, who you're like, what is he actually up? Like, we know what he's doing, but what is he up to here? We know the goal, but what then? I don't know. I was just curious about him. And I think even though it's clear because of, like you were saying, the Southern accent, but I just like that there are different people with different motives. You have Billy Bob, whose literally only characteristic is, I need to shoot Shaggy in the face. And his gun just keeps on getting, his rifle just keeps on getting taken from him and smashed by the ape, smashed by Sadie, who I'm guessing is his sister, based on this. Yeah. But I was happy that they put in many different characters where there were different things to look at that kept you going. When we went to the sections with the Boo Brothers, it was nice because it was just a relief from going back to the chase scenes. So I think the pacing of it all, where you had enough characters to stop it from being boring, like we found with the Reluctant Werewolf, was just exciting for me. Speaking of the ending too, Bradley, do you think that it just makes sense for this ending for twin brothers? Or is this a trope that maybe you don't like seeing because of how much we see it today and just people view it as, I think in some ways it's like, oh, of course, that's the easy answer. Someone we didn't know did something like this. Or do you see it as more of a, oh, aha, whoa, intriguing?
It doesn't really mind me. It doesn't really bother me, especially because we technically do get to hear his voice through the police, whatever you call it, the walkie-talkie, whatever it was. Come in, Rufus, where are you? So technically we do kind of know about him in a way, not to a full character aspect, but we do kind of get introduced to him. So I don't really see it as a cop-out. I see more of like an ending of like, oh, it was all a dream. That's a bigger cop-out to me than, instituting a twin brother. Probably maybe because at the time when I originally watched it, I was like, oh, maybe that is pretty cool. Oh, wow, a twin brother? I'd never thought of that. But to be honest, it really did not. It didn't affect my viewing of the ending. Like, oh my God, of course, the twin brothers here. Why not? And if you even think back to the early Scooby-Doos, a lot of the early villains from Where Are You? Some of them we didn't even know who they were until they got captured. Like the second one, Hassel in the Castle, it was this magician guy. Who was he? We haven't seen him at all. Or Captain Cutler. Like we saw a picture of him and that was it. We didn't even know. So almost it was like a throwback to the original Scooby-Doos.
Something we haven't even chatted about, the Boo Brothers, who are the title characters and yet are only, I feel like, a small portion of this movie. There's one great part with them where Shaggy is about to fire them. He hires them. I love the little animation of them popping through the phone. And I love the ghost. Normally when you have people go through a ghost Casper style, they just kind of fade through. But these people popping through this white puffiness. And Shaggy's about to fire them. And they said that they're orphaned ghosts without parents. And it feels like they're grifting Shaggy. It really did to me. I felt bad. I felt more bad for Shaggy than I did for the Boo Brothers. But I think that's my own bias. But Kalle, what are your thoughts on the Boo Brothers, who are characters who are basically the Three Stooges? They are essentially just three bumbling ghosts who are walking around, messing everything up, and we always come back to them and we see their mischief. Did you enjoy that for this? Do you think it maybe took away from the main story enough to keep you entertained?
Yeah, I think it had like that perfect amount of the plot taken that made it entertaining. Like it wasn't the entire movie is those three like messing things up or causing trouble or whatever. and it wasn't like we only saw them once. I think they were like sprinkled throughout the perfect amount that I was able to find them funny and like be entertained and still pay attention to them and not get like annoyed or think there was too much or too little of them.
Bradley, same thing to you. As your favorite movie, do you enjoy this movie more because of the Boo Brothers and the energy they bring as kind of Three Stooges-esque? Or does it maybe, watching it now, maybe it's a bit too cartoonish? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting that you brought up the Three Stooges because I thought exactly the same thing. Literally, Frico says certainly or certainly like Curly, and nyuk 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 is said by Shriko just like Curly. I call them the Three Stooges with the Marx Brothers names because everything ends in O. But in terms of their characters, I was really surprised by the fact that how little they were in the movie. I thought that they were in the right amount in terms of the comedic value, because if you do it too much, then you lose the power of the comedy. So I thought that they were in it the right amount for that. But if you're in the title of the movie, especially when there's a mystery, an actual mystery in this movie, why aren't they helping them solve the mystery? It mind boggles me how they're not even in the parts where they're solving the mystery. You know, they're almost like these, you know, they're bridging the gap between scenes almost. You know, they're the ones going from one scene to the other with a little comedic chops in the middle, and then we go on to the next thing. So I was shocked at how little they were in this movie. And you know, with the opening montage with the song "The Boo Brothers," dun, 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 you would think that they were the villains of the movie. You know, especially with this creepy, witchy sounding voice singing about them, like "Don't mess with the Boo Brothers," dun, dun, dun. And you would think that they were the stars of the villains of the movie, and you find out they're the comedic relief. It's interesting. I guess it's a good turn of events in terms of what you're typically expecting from maybe a title villain in a Scooby-Doo movie. But I thought that they should have been present a little more.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you that you feel like going in because of how quick it starts too, that you don't see them for a while initially. As title characters, you're going and expecting, oh, I see it says Boo Brothers. I see ghosts. I'm excited for these ghosts. And it takes a little bit of time to roll into it, to be able to see the ghosts and be like, okay, here's who they are. Here's what we're talking about. That they're not even the villains or not even, top billing as you say, even though they are on the title. Something we ask about entertainment value on this podcast too is, would you watch this movie on a date? Which I think it's a perfect time to get into because of the way the movie is paced. It's quick. It's very, very go from A to B to B to C, back to A, back to this spot, back to this spot. Now we're looking for this clue. And I think if someone picked this movie on a first date, I go, oh, deep cut. You have taste. Interesting. But I would definitely appreciate because of that. And while I'm going to qualify my answer and say I don't think, it's an incredible date movie to put you in a mood for a date, I think it works to be able to, maybe if there's awkwardness, if there's, if you're trying to get the awkwardness out of the way, there's some aspects that you can make some jokes about Sadie and Billy Bob and, their hillbilly-esque nature, and just some jokes about the horny ape who that's, again, the one characteristic, and that he's afraid of the dark. But I think I'm going to give it a thumbs up on the date scale. I think this getting me on a second date. Kalle, you're very known now for saying that every Scooby-Doo movie is a good date movie, and then you've rescinded this and now put it back into place. Are you rescinding it once again, or is this a solid date movie?
I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give this a middle thumb, not up, not down. It's in the middle, okay? I think if there's two Scoobsters that are on this date, okay, two Scooby fans, this is a good date movie, because it's like, if you're just two people who are, you're not one of us three sitting here, okay? You don't have a podcast about Scooby-Doo. You're not a huge fan, and you're just looking for something to watch on a first date, and you pick Scooby-Doo and the Boo Brothers. I feel like there's so many better things you could pick. It's just a weird choice for a first date, especially even if you want to watch Scooby-Doo in general. That's fine. There's other Scooby-Doo things that would make better date movies, I think. There's also ones that would make worse date movies. That's why I'm giving it's in the middle. I think it depends I'm not going to definitively say it's a good or bad one. I'm going to say it depends on the situation. It could be a good date movie.
I think it's easy to jump in and out of, which is why I like it as a good date
Mm-hmm.
movie. But Bradley, as this is your favorite movie, I'm sure you're going to be biased here, but I think I'm going to ask you a second question on top of it. Not only is this a good date movie in general, but not just because it's your favorite movie, would you pick this movie out on a date? Not if your partner did, but would you handpick this movie on a date, a movie that's so special to you as your favorite? I don't know, maybe if your date doesn't like it, that kind of taints the date a little bit. What are your thoughts?
Well, they either get this or Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune. So it's their pick. Of course. Why would you? First of all, symbolically, if this is a first date, this was the first ever Scooby-Doo movie ever. Why would you not want to watch on your first date the first ever Scooby-Doo movie? I mean, right then and there. I mean, it's golden. You can tie that in. Oh my God, our first date, we're going to watch the first movie. And as the years and months or days go by, we're going to continue on the track of Scooby-Doo, you know, the golden road of Scooby-Doo. So there you go with that. Second of all, if you love characters, I think Sheriff Busby, Sadie, and Billy Bob are three of the best supporting characters in Scooby-Doo history. I mean, they are comedy gold. They have some of the best liners, I think, in the Scooby universe. So you got comedy right there. You got interaction. You know, you can have your date and you try to see who's going to solve the riddle first, who's going to crack the code first. So you got interactive, you got comedy, you got the fact that it's the first one and you're on your first date. I don't see why you would not like the Boo Brothers to be on your list of things to do as a first date.
I like how when you said that at the start, you said, as we're counting down the years or the months or the days, you know, just
start out strong and then, well, maybe okay.
I think I think the problem that we as not being this our favorite movie, I think what this does is anything basically before 1995 for us, it's so different animation style that I think people in general who aren't big animation fans or Scooby-Doo fans tend to check out a little bit because we're conditioned to a much brighter, more large expression. There's many times this where Shaggy's face is literally maybe 8 dots on a screen. And it's just such a different era when it comes to that I think it's sometimes hard for someone to buy in, even for an hour and a half, which this honestly, Reluctant Werewolf felt like 4.5 hours. This felt like half of the time. Even though the scavenger hunt was an hour of the hour and a half, and I think you could parcel it down, it still doesn't feel like a full hour and a half, and you could check in and check out. But Bradley, if your date does not enjoy this movie, are you continuing on a second date or are you ending it there?
Well, I could try out Survivor and see how that works. But in terms of Scooby-Doo, you know, with anything, it comes with taste. You know, I'm a very, you know, I like the weirdest things in terms of what many people might like. I like 70s game shows and Scooby-Doo. You know, it's a very, very, you know, narrow-minded taste in terms of me. But you know, in terms of when I give it them a second chance in terms of the Boo Brothers, you know, you can't always judge by the first one. Maybe we'll get to the, you know, the Legends of the Vampire or the Monster of Mexico. Who knows? Or actually, well, my second favorite is Cyber Chase. So I think maybe if I ask them, let's watch Cyber Chase, I think maybe I'd get a good feedback off of a second date. But you know, some things just don't click. I do think that this is much better than some other ones. Like, to be honest, like, I'm a huge Scooby-Doo fan, and some of the movies I probably couldn't even tell you. I've watched them all, but I probably couldn't tell you what they're about. This one I think is very, maybe it's because of the fact that the Boo Brothers are in the title and you remember, oh yeah, of course I remember the Boo Brothers, and maybe that connects to something. So it's a little bit more memorable, which is maybe why I'd also pick it out, because you know, I remember it more fondly, not just because it's my favorite, but because of, you know, the title rings a bell to more things than some other titles might. But sure, why not? I mean, anything Scooby-Doo, you know, there's always a story to tell. So even if you come out of the movie with just a story to tell, like, guess what I did on my first day? We watched Scooby-Doo, and let me tell you how it went. You know, you get something out of it. So sure, why not?
Your tone saying that of, you know, maybe one half of the date is saying, I watched Scooby-Doo on my first date. What a date. And the other half is saying, I watched Scooby-Doo on my first date. I could see something like that happen. But Scooby-Doo meets the Boo Brothers, I think checks a box where you feel like it's going to be, from a modern perspective looking at it, you feel like it's going to be one of those meets the Harlem Globetrotters, meets this celebrity, meets that celebrity. And then you watch it, and it's a bit surprising in that it's, one, not that. And two, I think better than that because it doesn't suffer from the, oh my God, it's the Harlem Globetrotters, where because it's the first movie, I think they play around with the idea of, well, what if we made Scooby-Doo a little different with coming off of trying to heighten the series with Scrappy-Doo? What if we gave it, some new characters, a different vibe? And I think this might be a perfect time to go into our ratings at a 10 Scooby Snacks with a nostalgic ranking and a current day ranking. And I'll go first and then Kalle, and then we'll end it off with you, Bradley. I think my nostalgic ranking, because the first 50 minutes of this, I remembered flawlessly. And I was so surprised as I was watching it. And I was like, I remember that happening. And I haven't watched this movie since I was maybe 7 years old. And I very vividly remembered the music, which stuck out to me as just the background, the sound effects, and everything else. So my nostalgic ranking, I'm going to give it a solid 8 out of 10 Scooby Snacks on that. And my current day ranking, I think I have to lower a tiny bit because we've been watching so much Scooby media. But I'm going to give it a very high, for me, for this time period, 7.75 out of 10. You can give any decimal point, any weird number you want. And for me, I think that's higher on a personal list and just more easier, like I keep saying, to pop in and out of when you're watching it. And you can pause and you can come back, as we do in our quarantining, Netflix binging times, where people, have to, gotta go to the bathroom, gotta do this. Oh, I have to do this assignment, gotta come back. Kalle, are you going to rip this one to shreds? What are you giving it on your nostalgic and your current day rankings out of 10 Scooby Snacks?
I'm not going to rip it to shreds because I did enjoy it a lot more than Reluctant Werewolf. So I promise I will not rip this one to shreds. For my nostalgic ranking, I remember definitely watching it, but when I was rewatching it, it was like hazy. Like I remember little things here and there, but I didn't have like a solid recollection of the thing as a whole. But I didn't remember disliking it. So I'll give it like a 6 out of 10 nostalgia ranking. Like I remember having seen it and not hating it. So solid 6 out of 10. Current day ranking. I'll give it 6.5 out of 10. Current day ranking. It was definitely better than Reluctant Werewolf. Better than some of the recent ones we've been watching. Not as good as I think the more recent ones that I've said are my favorites and the ones that I watched more as a kid. So 6.5 out of 10.
Solid scores here compared to some of the previous. We had a streak there where we were going very low. Bradley, I'll be very surprised if they're not both 10 out of 10s, but I just want to hear if they are, if they aren't. Maybe if this isn't someone's favorite movie and you had to give them a quick pitch as to, we're jumbling this up, the too long didn't watch version of the podcast. If you were pitching this movie, maybe you're saying, we need a sequel to this movie. We need this again. Is there something about the movie you would change to make it better for people who don't love it, or if we were bringing it back? And what are your rankings, nostalgic and current day?
So I'll start with nostalgic. By far, 10 out of 10, of course. And here's I have a reason. Here's why. First of all, this is the definition of nostalgia Scooby-Doo movies, being that it's the first one. I can't, you can't say that like chill out Scooby-Doo is nostalgic. I mean, sure, it was from when I was a kid, but am I calling that nostalgic? No, I'm calling this nostalgic. Maybe 30 years down the line, this will be ultra nostalgic and chill out Scooby-Doo will be nostalgic, but that's for a later day. So 10 out of 10 for nostalgia value, especially because you have, I mean, in a nutshell, I would think that Scrappy-Doo is nostalgia in its own right. Because, besides the live action one where he was basically, I think, put in the movie as a nostalgia value, like, oh my God, true Scooby-Doo fans would love Scrappy-Doo in the movie. I think he was purposely put in there for nostalgia value. And since he's in this, I think nostalgia all the way, 10 out of 10. So for current day, would I say 10 out of 10? That is the question all of the viewers are waiting to find out. And here is my answer. Would I say 10 out of 10? No. And the reason I do say no is because I think it's only because I watched it differently now. Like I'm going to go back to being the game guy excuse. So I watched it as someone trying to figure out this movie as a game. And, the riddles, as I said, excellent. But, when you think about it, and this has nothing to do with, the animators or the storyline, the story creators, but as someone who's just like watching this and like, of course, this is a cartoon. This isn't like a real thing. Obviously, there's like real spirits, so of course it's not real. But I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, so Farquaad, he thought he should have been left the jewels, right? And all of a sudden, the first jewel is in plain sight in a refrigerator in an ice tray. And I'm saying to myself, so Farquaad, you couldn't just go in that refrigerator and look around and, oh my God, there's a diamond. Or the fireplace. There's a large lever there. And, apparently he's been working at the house for, I think he said 60 years at the start. He was the caretaker for 60 years. You didn't notice this lever and wanted to, pull it down to see, if it comes up cherry, 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 or bar, 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 and you win the grand prize. So I guess looking at it that way makes me devalue it a little bit. And that's just my own crazy game show brain at work. So I guess maybe I shouldn't look at it that way so I could appreciate it more, but it's just me and how I think. So in terms of my current day ranking, I would still rank it at a solid 8.5. And another reason why I degraded a little bit is because I'm not the biggest fan of the real ghosts in Scooby-Doo. I think that takes away from the magic of Scooby-Doo, which is a mystery. And I think it would have been lower, to be honest, and it probably would have been my favorite movie if there wasn't a mystery at the end. If it was just like, I actually do like Ghoul School. I actually really enjoy Ghoul School, but I think it's that one I like more because of the comedy value and that sort of storyline in terms of just, oh, these are real ghosts and here they are, like on the Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo show. But I'm not the biggest fan of there being no mystery. I think that is pointless in Scooby-Doo. Like I watched the show for the mystery, which is why it's not a total 10 out of 10 in terms of, now it's 8 out of 5. I think is pretty good compared to some of the more recent ones. Although I do think that the music in some of the more recent ones is actually really, really good. Like in Big Top Scooby-Doo, I love the theme song, "The Circus Comes to Town." I think that's one of the best Scooby-Doo songs ever. And this one was, the opening song, it introduces the Boo Brothers. I would have liked the song to be a little more about what the story was going to end up being about, because when you watch it, you're like, okay, these are going to be these scary creatures, and they're the Three Stooges. But so I think that's a little why I devalued it a little more. But 8.5 out of 10, I think is solid for my ranking in terms of right now. And I completely forgot what your second part of the question was.
Yeah, just super quick. If there's one little aspect, one thing that you would change to make it better or add, what would it be for, you're pitching to the Scooby-Doo execs right here. What are you adding really quickly?
What am I adding to the Boo Brothers? I think, again, like more Boo Brothers. It's called Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers. I want more Boo Brothers. Or even those little things I was talking about. Oh, here's another thing. Where do all these diamonds go when they find them? It's like you're trying to find these diamonds, and then all of a sudden they're like, voided. They find these diamonds in the ice tray and in where is it? This pearl necklace in plain sight in the basement. And where do they go? Nowhere. I want to know that they're actually keeping these diamonds somewhere safe so that Farquaad or the Skull Ghost, whatever, they don't find them. Like, where are these diamonds going? Of course, it's a cartoon. I know, they only have a certain amount of time, and that's really irrelevant in terms of the whole big plot. But as someone watching it, I'm saying to myself, you're trying to find these diamonds, and these diamonds disappear. Like, come on, let me see you put it in your pocket at least.
Yeah, there's some of that animation, sometimes you have to suspend your disbelief a bit, which we talk about a lot as adults. We go, why just add something in that makes me comfortable with it?
Right.
And, that happens a lot. But Bradley, as we finish the ranking, I can't thank you enough. I didn't know you were a big Scooby fan. Kalle was wearing her Survivor hat. We're all big fans of reality and game shows too. It's like maybe the two things, I would wonder if they overlap in some way for people. I guess we'll put a poll up. Who knows? But thank you so much for coming on. We'll plug all your stuff. You have a great podcast on your own talking about reality and game shows and interviewing people. It's really intriguing stuff. I listen. It's a great podcast overall. And Kalle, let's hit him with the outro.
Ruh-roh. Looks like we're all out of time. Sorry once again to Michael Vito Valentino. We had to bump him yet again, but we'll see him next time on A Pod Named Scooby-Doo.